Russia has produced some of hockey's greatest superstars who have gone on to achieve great feats and help take their NHL teams to new heights. Many people in North America have opinions about the KHL and Russian hockey as a whole, despite the fact that very few know the history or basic facts about rules, teams, or players within the league. In this multi-part series, I'm going to dive into the inner workings of Russian hockey and even attempt to help you pick your new favorite KHL team. In part 1, we will go over a brief history of the KHL, organizational structure, season format, team construction, media perceptions, and more. So let's get started. The KHL, or Continental Hockey League, was officially founded in 2008 as the Russian Super League and has slowly evolved into the modern KHL. This was an update from the original Soviet Championship League, which existed from 1946 to 1992. Currently, there are 23 teams in the league split between two conferences, the East and the West, and 4 divisions, the Bobrov, Tarasov, Harlamov, and Chernyshev, named after coaches and players who helped to grow the game of hockey in Russia through their successful seasons and international tournaments. The current structure provides tons of room for expansion, with opportunities to promote VHL franchises or expand into other European and Asian countries to continue the mission of creating a league that spans multiple continents. The current countries represented in the KHL include Russia, China, Belarus, and Kazakhstan. Expansion further into Europe is not very likely at the current moment due to the political situation, but before 2022, there were 2 teams located in Finland and Latvia, as well as a team in Czechia that left in 2019. Teams have been added, demoted, and promoted over the course of the league's history due to financial changes and political issues. The KHL does not select players in an entry draft, but operates with a farm system very similar to many other European leagues, where young players typically grew up playing for their local club's youth team and work their way up through the system, eventually earning a spot on the pro roster. The 3 key leagues to know in Russia are the KHL, which is the highest level of pro hockey, the VHL, which is the second tier of pro hockey, equivalent to the AHL, and the MHL, which is the highest level of junior hockey in Russia. I will have individual videos on the VHL and MHL later in this series, so stay tuned. There are situations where youth players are recruited and moved to play in better club systems or packaged in a trade, but it is very common to play for your hometown or region's team for a large percentage of your hockey career. Players have the ability to switch teams while the transfer window is open from around May 1st to the end of December. Free agency signings typically occur from May to August before the season starts, and trades are able to be made between teams until the deadline in late December. 2 championships occur within the KHL season. The first is the Continental Cup, which is officially named after Viktor Tikhonov, a longtime KHL player and ex-Phoenix Coyote. The Continental Cup is given to the team with the most points in the regular season and is the equivalent to the NHL's President's Trophy. The second trophy the teams fight for is the Gagarin Cup, which is awarded to the playoff champion, or the equivalent to the Stanley Cup. Teams play for the cup named after pop culture icon and first human to go to space in 1961, Yuri Gagarin. There are 4 best-of-7 series just like the NHL. The only difference is that matchups are reseeded after each round, with the highest seed playing against the lowest seed that made it to that round. The teams who currently lead the league with the most championships are Metallurg Magnitogorsk, CSKA Moskva, and Akbars, who each have 3 championships. Metallurg is the current reigning champ, defeating Lokomotiv in a final a few weeks ago. There are also many derby and rivalry games that are promoted throughout the season, including the Battle of the Armies between SKA and CSKA, the Battle of the Far East between Amur and Admiral, the Battle of Siberia between Novosibirsk and Omsk, the Derby of the Urals between Traktor and Avto, and the Green Derby between Ufa and Akbars, which is one of the most popular, where teams compete for bragging rights and a feast of the popular local dessert, Chok Chok. The KHL has a number of rules for GMs to keep in mind when designing their roster. They have a hard salary cap, which was introduced to the league in 2019 of 900 million rubles, or around $10.1 million US. There are also multiple rules for limits on types of player contracts. For the upcoming 24-25 season, teams are limited to 25 one-way contracts and no more than 45 bi- or trilateral contracts, which are contracts that allow players to play for all 3 affiliated leagues, the KHL, VHL, and MHL. That number increases to 75 bi- and trilateral contracts if the team owns their affiliated VHL or MHL teams. There are also limits on the number of international contracts on a KHL roster. The Russian Hockey Federation wants the league to be mostly made up of native-born players from the country that their team is based in. Clubs must have at least 10 players on their roster from their home country and currently can have no more than 3 international signed skaters and 1 international goalie in the lineup for any one game. There are currently talks of the KHL leaving the Russian Hockey Federation to become its own privately run entity. This would allow the league to make its own choices and rules without RHF influence. This would very likely bring changes to roster regulations and allow for more international players per roster. This would also bring potential for sooner patches to the relationship between the KHL, NHL, and IIHF. A majority of people in North America have developed negative perceptions about the KHL due to the wild stories told on podcasts, radio shows, and interviews, and rightfully so. In the early days of the league, nearly every team was owned and operated by oil barons, oligarchs, and mob bosses who made sure that they got what they wanted through force and violence. Players were not paid on time or given less than what was agreed upon, money and items were stolen from players, and international stars were treated like property brought over to entertain the banditti. The KHL was also much more violent than it is today. Brawls occurred often both on and off the ice, and NHL enforcers were paid top dollar to fight some of Russia's toughest scrappers. Recently, however, the league has put a lot of effort into legitimizing their processes to make sure that players are treated fairly. Owners have been forced to become more professional in their dealings or to step down, causing better playing and living conditions for international skaters. Standard practices have also been put into place to ensure that players are treated as they would be in many of the other top leagues in the world. Whether this is truly happening, I have no idea, but we have not heard as many complaints and stories from recent seasons, and many North American-born skaters have applied for Russian citizenship since entering the league, so I'm very hopeful that these problems have been solved for the most part. The KHL does not rival the NHL in talent as it did in the past, but nearly every KHL franchise has begun to adopt many of the same strategies for business, training, facility construction, and player development as North American clubs, so we will likely begin to see improvements in the quality of play and entertainment value as a whole in coming years. The KHL is still not perfect, but I recommend everyone watching this video to begin paying attention because it is a fun and exciting league with lots of room to grow.